All right, thank you guys. Woo.
Okay, if they start playing, yeah, we're gonna have to mute because of the, if you're watching on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, we're gonna have to mute. We will come back when they start. All right, we're getting started. For those of you on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, and we have turned off the mute because the music has stopped.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the BIPOC Solidarity Community Rally. Woo! Yay. Before we start, I just want to pull out my phone, but I've already said thank you, so thank you again. I'm super grateful for not just our community members here, but also individual KIRKLAND. I know you're out there. Yes. And the team for Eastside Embrace. I'm super grateful. I know, yeah, they're here too. And the council members that are here for KIRKLAND. Woo! All right, so before we start, I just want to remind people this is a space. This event is to hold space. And what I mean by that is to be physically, mentally, and emotionally present for our speakers. Which means to focus on them to support how they feel, and to hold judgment while you're here being present. So just a reminder. And the second thing that's really important is, as individuals, especially white individuals here, if there are conflicts, if people start coming here and start screaming all lives matter somehow, or just that conflict, I want to let you know that it is not my job. It's not the job of BIPOC people to stop them. It's your job. That's what you get to do. Okay? I hope that doesn't happen. I don't think it is, but it's just a reminder. All right. I'm gonna let the first speaker come, and it's going to be Erica. I love her. She's amazing, and she has a lot of feelings, so I love it. Here you go.
Happy birthday to you, Saul. Happy birthday.
Let me get that to stay. Hello. Okay. Is this okay? It's not gonna. It just kind of fell.
Need it higher?
Yeah, a little bit higher. Thank you.
Little pause here for EV.
Hello all. I'm going to start with the land acknowledgement. Today we gather on the stolen ancestral land of the Coast Salish peoples. Of these peoples is the Duwamish tribe, who are fighting for federal recognition and have been for the past 40 years. Please join me in honoring and showing gratitude for the people of this land, past and present. Action is important, so please learn more about how you can support the Duwamish tribe in their fight for federal recognition. And please also consider paying rent to the tribes whose lands you live, work, and vacation on. So, I'm very nervous. Give me some energy, give me some support out there. Nikita said, my name is Erica. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a biracial, Japanese, and white cis woman, and I hold a lot of privilege in the intersections of my identity. I have gratitude for everybody that is here today, showing solidarity for a cause that at the heart of it impacts all of us. I'm proud to be Japanese, but this was not always the case. Growing up, I hated my Asianness, and all I wanted was to be white. This is the experience of many. We have been taught implicitly that proximity to whiteness would save us, would keep us safe from harm. But this is far from the truth. And the trade-off is a deep internalized oppression that lives in our bodies and skews our view of ourselves, our society, and reality, doing much more harm than any racial lashings could ever do. Shame and self-hatred is the only possible result when we carry unseen oppression in our bodies. We cannot see how the illness in our society impacted our development. and we blame ourselves for the way that the world has harmed us. When I was growing up, there was no representation of Asian people on TV. And when they made an appearance, the women were either over-sexualized or asexual, and the men were emasculated. The dehumanization of marginalized people shows up in many ways. How media represents people matters. Our words matter. Calling COVID-19 the Chinese virus or Kung Flu has an impact. And us Asians are living it right now. We are feeling it in our hearts and minds and bodies day in and day out. We are human. And we are not a monolith. The women who were murdered in Atlanta were human, despite how the media portrayed them, despite the fact that the media humanized the killer more than they did the victims. Sex workers are human. We have to think about our language, about the words we use, about our rhetoric. If Asian people are your punchline, if sex workers are your punchline, if Kung Flu is your punchline, the responsibility for what happened and continues to happen to Asian people is in part yours. In the topic of solidarity, it is imperative to ground in the concept of intersectionality. A quick definition is this: the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, socioeconomic status, disability, sexuality, and gender as they apply to a given individual or group. These categories create overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. Through an awareness of intersectionality, we can better acknowledge and understand the differences between each person's level of privilege and our place in the fight for justice. When intersectionality is ignored, integrity is compromised and progress is stifled. White feminism is a great example of this. We are not feminists if we don't pay attention to intersections of identity and privilege. We are not feminists if we are trans exclusionary. We cannot be allies if we do not pay attention to intersections of privilege and start by fighting for the liberation of those who are most marginalized in our society. A few words on allyship. First rule, you don't get to call yourself an ally. It's not somewhere where we arrive. It's not something that we declare and is done when our discomfort is relieved. When personal comfort is centered, white supremacy is at play. You should feel uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, because in essence, we are deconstructing our own sense of reality that functions only to assist in remaining comfortable while others suffer, and while we gain from that suffering. So the work is not done when we feel better. The work is done when BIPOC people are no longer marginalized, ostracized, suffering, and dying at the hands of systemic racism. The work will be done when there is racial equity, freedom, and justice for all. I choose to use the word camaraderie in place of allyship because it highlights that this is a fight we are in together. We stand rooted in the fundamental principles of human rights and understand that our liberation is intimately intertwined and that our collective liberation can only materialize through togetherness. But guess what? The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do: oppress people and make profits. And how do we keep oppressed people in their place? By keeping them divided. Did you know that the concept of whiteness itself was created in America in the 17th century? Back then, poor people had the same status regardless of their skin color. In the colonial capital of Virginia, black and white indentured servants and enslaved people came together and attempted to overthrow the reigning power in what was called Bacon's Rebellion. Word spread and more uprisings followed. And the elite were terrified. They knew that they had to do something to protect their power and their wealth by dividing the lower class. And so they enacted laws that said that people of African descent were hereditary slaves, and they gave more power and rights to the poor white people. Money, land, freedom and a vote, and the power to lead slave patrols, which modern day policing was born from. And it is no coincidence that policing's racist roots have brought us to what we are seeing today. The system is not broken. The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is also no coincidence that there are tensions in the relationship between Asian and Black people. Asians were used as the model minority to perpetuate anti-Blackness, the necessary tenet of white supremacy. Our perceived success and the stereotype that we are hardworking, obedient, and docile is used to contrast the perceived lack of success and obedience of Black Americans. This created the incorrect assumption that Black Americans, the non-model race, is at fault for falling short from the model minority levels of success and assimilation. The tension between our communities is an illusion. The tension is white supremacy. And anyone from any race can be influenced by white supremacy. So the few Black people who have attacked Asians post-pandemic are subscribing to the white supremacist narrative that we brought COVID and that we are subhuman. And anyone who blames Black people as a whole for the attack on Asians are subscribing to the white supremacist narrative that Black people are inherently aggressive and are subhuman. And as people call on the Black community to stand up for Asians, we need to remember that they always have. And lest we forget, we are all direct beneficiaries of Black-led civil rights movements, including the one that we are in today. So how do we stop this cycle? How do we fight against white supremacy? Where does the healing begin? As a psychotherapist, I can tell you without any doubt that the first step to healing is for the harm to be heard, truly heard, held, even if it isn't fully understood yet. No buts, no whatabouts. People of color need to be heard and believed for their experience over any opinion or belief you might have. Commit to listening and learning, even when the voices you are hearing don't feel palatable, even when what you're hearing sounds unbelievable or non-resonant. Challenge your own reactions. Don't seek white commentary in history, as this is another way that white supremacy has reared its head and perpetuated harm. Let BIPOC people be your educators. Let us be your guides, and allow space for the expression of the entire range of human emotion, especially by Black people. Let us be angry. Let us be rageful, because it is our rage that brings us here, and ultimately it is our rage that will change this world for the better. The next step, which I alluded to, is understanding that the delusion of white supremacy doesn't just negatively impact people of color. It affects everyone. White people. The impact of internalized white supremacy on the psyche runs deep. You may not feel it, and therein lies the problem. And it's exactly what the powers that be intended it. Colonialism, white supremacy, and capitalism, which all go hand in hand, are forces that have separated our mind and body, disconnected us from our emotional experience and needs, from our true sense of self, from the humanity of others, and our connection to the earth. How could we be embodied, connected, self-aware people and turn a blind eye to the suffering of others? It's impossible. So once again, the system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, keeping us disembodied and separate. And it's time to heal this. It's time to save our humanity. I've come to painfully know that there's often a direct correlation with one's level of systemic oppression and their willingness to get out there and fight, to speak up, to engage in activism, to engage in conversation, to work to decolonize themselves. And it isn't in the direction that it should be. White people, you need to be working harder than any of us. If you don't do something about the delusion of white supremacy, about racial inequity, about the system that puts people over profits to your direct benefit, blood is on your hands. Asian people, if we don't fight against anti-blackness in our communities and fight for Black liberation, blood is also on our hands. And further, we will never see our own liberation. We need to work together, and we need to see this as a community issue, a nationwide issue, a global issue that cannot be resolved without unity. And not the BS unity that asks the oppressed to sit at the table with their oppressor when the wrongs haven't been made right. We have to make things right first, starting with our most marginalized populations. Reparations and divesting from police and investing in communities of color is a starting point. Abolition is an endpoint, but that is going to be for another speech. Nothing will change unless we collectively heal and mobilize. And again, the biggest call out goes to the white folks here, and I'm so glad to see so many of you here today. You hold the power. Your camaraderie is vital. Comrades, can you make contact with the humanity of BIPOC people? All non-Black people, to quote Dr. Cornel West, do you have the will to stay in contact with the rich humanity of Black people? To stay in contact with the beauty of Black people, the intelligence of Black people, and the soulfulness of Black people? And I'm going to add the joy of Black people. Everyone here with different intersections of privilege, do you have the will to stay in contact with the humanity of trans and gender non-conforming people? Neurodivergent people, fat-bodied people, those with disabilities, with trauma histories, with addictions, the houseless. Do we have the will to stay in contact with our own humanity? We must open our hearts and fight for a society that leaves no one behind. Again, we must protect the most vulnerable or be complicit to a system that harms, erases, and kills. Too many lives have been lost. Precious human life. Do not let this be in vain. Let us learn our lessons now and rise up from the shadows of colonialism and white supremacy and fight together in their names. Say their names. Dante Wright, Adam Toledo, Christian Hall, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, Charlena Lyles, Manuel Ellis, and our Asian family murdered in Atlanta. I'm going to say it slowly so you can follow along. Xiao Jie Tan, Dao Yo Feng, Soon Chung Park, Hyun Chong Grant, Soon Cha Kim, Young AU. I read once that living in a capitalist, aka colonial white supremacist society is a process of unlearning empathy. Let us break down the walls that keep us from connecting. Let us break down the walls that keep us from acting when we know that other people are suffering. Let us dismantle white supremacy from the inside out and decolonize our minds and our hearts. Let us remember empathy. Let us unlearn divisive colonial thought and narratives and remember community and unity. Let us unlearn shame and remember acceptance, worthiness, and unconditional love for ourselves and for others. Let us unlearn binary limiting beliefs and remember spectrums of thought and expressions. Let us move through this numb disconnection. We deserve more than this. We deserve togetherness. We deserve the capacity to feel deeply for others. We deserve to be connected to the humanity of others and thus our own. Thank you.
This is a sit down and listen event in support of Black Lives Matter and minorities in Kirkland, Washington. We are live.
Can we get one more yay for support for Erica? Thank you. All right, so our next speaker is gonna be Lane. She's amazing too. All the speakers are amazing, I'll just remind that. But I'll just give you the mic, here you go.
I'm not that tall, hold on a second. Here we go. Oh, not on my nose, got it. Hey everyone, thank you for being here. I just wanted to express my gratitude before I forget. I want to thank Ray, who's volunteering his time and his equipment for us to hold this event today. I want to thank all of our volunteers that came out of nowhere and just came to help set us up, be manning our tables. I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day as well. So I'm Lane, or Elaine. I'm here to talk about race. What is race? Do you know what it is? Really, can you define it? Think about that for a second. Is it defined by skin color? Black, brown, white? Is it defined by content of origin? Africa, Asia, Europe? Maybe you're thinking it's a bit of both, but it's actually neither. If we ourselves cannot come up with a clear definition of race, how do we have these conversations with our children, with our parents, with our family and friends? It's such a tough conversation every time because it is so unclear. But these uncomfortable conversations are necessary. And it is especially necessary for our young kids. Did you know that in infancy, babies can notice differences in our skin color, our hair texture, and our eye shape? By 6 months old, babies show signs of racial bias. I have 2 young kids. Hello. They're Filipino, Japanese, and white. Joey, she's turning 6 in a couple months. Say hi, Joey. Teddy will be 4 next month. Say hi, Teddy. When my daughter was 2, she asked me, Mama, why is my skin so much lighter than yours? It's something I've been acutely aware of from the moment she was born. I would go for walks at this very park wondering who's looking at me and my baby, thinking I'm the nanny, thinking that I am not her mom, thinking these things white parents of white babies never have to think about. And it is white privilege for that thought to never cross your mind. Being anti-racist is a lifelong journey. Even I, as a Filipino American, I'm not gonna always get it right. It's okay to make mistakes. You just have to try. You have to do the work. Make the effort. Show up for your community. Show up for your neighbors. Show up for people like me who have to live in fear anytime I leave my house. More importantly, show up for my kids. Show up for your kids. Show up for the future of our children so that they don't have to fight the fight that we have to fight every day. So that they can live in true solidarity. Now, if you're concerned that your child is too young for this conversation, know that your child is waiting for you to talk to them about why everyone has different skin color. They are not colorblind. They see it. They recognize it. At such a young age, they are forming their own sense of identity based on the color of their skin. Now, if you're thinking, this doesn't apply to me, my kids are older, or maybe you're not a parent, please continue to listen closely. You can still make an impact and still have these necessary conversations with your loved ones, no matter how young or old. I think it's a lot easier to have these conversations these days. There's so many resources that people are posting all over social media, right? There's so many things being shared, created. Even Sesame Street, they have a workshop group with videos, recommended books to help drive that conversation of what racism is, what race means, and how and why it was created. No. There are so many children's books out there to help teach our kids, show them how people in other cultures experience life, how to be kind, how to embrace differences, how to stand up for one another. Now, these resources, they're great, super helpful. We still have more work to do. We still have to have those tough conversations. So I bought this book. It's amazing. It's called Our Skin. If you don't have it for your kids, you should totally buy it. It's a great way to start the conversation about race and racism. But hold up. We still haven't figured out what race is, right? So instead of me citing a bunch of academic journals and court cases that I've been reading up on, I'm just gonna read you the book, okay? Seriously, I'm gonna read you this book. So settle into your seats because it's story time. Let me just grab it real quick. All right, here it is. Our Skin. Written by Megan Madison, Jessica Raleigh, and illustrated by Isabel Rojas. We all have skin. It comes in different colors. What color is your skin? Now, as I ask these questions, I want you to think about what your answers are. We see different skin colors at the playground, at the grocery store, and on TV. What skin colors do you see? Our friends have different skin tones. So do the people in our families. What about in your family? Our skin is beautiful, strong, and important, just the way it is. What do you love about your skin? We get our color from something smart inside of our bodies. It's called melanin, that processes our skin from the sun. You have melanin too. We all do. Everybody has just the right amount for them. The darker your skin, the more melanin you have. The lighter your skin, the less melanin you have. Melanin makes our skin many beautiful shades from dark to light. What do you call your unique skin color? We may use color words to describe people, like black and white. Sometimes we say people of color, to talk about all the groups of people who aren't white. Our world has so many different groups of people, so there are a lot of words we use. Black, Indigenous, Asian, white, Arab, Pacific Islander, African American, Latinx, biracial, and so many more. What group do you belong to? Skin color can't tell you much about what people are like, what they know, what foods they think are yummy, what their favorite books are, or even where they were born. Just by looking at someone, we can't tell who they are on the inside, but sometimes people try anyways. A long time ago, before you were born, a group of white people made up an idea called race. They sorted people by skin color and said that white people were better, were smarter, prettier, and that they deserve more than everybody else. That isn't true. That isn't fair at all. But it's a story that has been told for a very long time. When people believe this untrue story about race, that's called racism. Racism is also things people do and the unfair rules they make about race so that white people get more power, are treated better than everybody else. Racism happens in a lot of big and small ways. It's all around us, even if we don't always notice it. Racism can be a rule, like if someone says, only friends with white skin can play. Racism can be an idea, like thinking princesses only have blonde hair. Racism can be a way we've done things for a long time, like how there aren't many books written about people of color. Racism can be on purpose, like calling a person of color a mean name because of their skin color. Racism can be by mistake, like if the same friend always has to play the bad guy. Racism hurts, and it's always unfair. That's why it's important to talk about it and do our part to make things better. All the time, even right now, people are working for racial justice by telling the truth and sharing feelings, by treating people the way they want to be treated, by bravely saying, that's not right, by marching in protests, by singing songs that bring us together, by changing unfair rules, by teaching, helping, learning, and listening. We can do it too. And then the book has a bunch of other conversation starters for parents to talk about with their kids. This is a kid's book, right? Did you get something out of this? Hold on. All right, guys. The ask is that you continue to educate yourself through rallies like this one, through books, documentaries, listen and lift up voices of our Black, Indigenous, people of color. Keep standing up for others. Keep taking action to be an active anti-racist ally or comrade, because that's what our children learn. They watch what we do. They watch you at a rally. They see you choosing books of people of color in the photos. They see you opening up the conversation, no matter how hard it can be. They watch you own up to your mistakes and bravely admit them and learn from them. They see you realizing that impact can be so much greater than any good intention. They see you choosing love over hate. The work to dismantle racism begins by helping our children understand what racism is and how it hurts people and impacts people. It begins by teaching our children to embrace and love all colors of skin, including their own. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lane, so much for that education. It was amazing. One more time. Woo! I just want to remind people, I know these are uncomfortable conversations. I know that this space may feel uncomfortable, and that's okay. It is okay for you to feel that way, but you can't stop there. You have to pass through it. Yes, and do something. So before we continue with more speakers, we're gonna have a 15-minute break because it's hot. And I want people to please stay hydrated. There's waters over there. And we'll just announce after when we're done, but thank you guys for being here. We're not done yet, so thank you.
Give me 1 second here, everybody. Can I get an interview with somebody?
Huh?
Can I get a quick interview with somebody?
Erica.
Up to her.
Yeah.
If she's okay with it. I know she was pretty emotional in her malcontents. We're working on getting a interview. Hey Erica, how are you? Wonderful speech, thank you. I want to move a little bit away from the music because we'll get knocked off the air. What's that?
You want me to put a mask on?
No, you're fine. Everyone's pretty gapped out and I'm wearing a mask and...
I'm not really good at speaking on the spot.
No, that's okay. It'll be real simple. I'll say we can kind of get a nice little framing on the concrete here. If you're watching on the live streams, they're taking a 15-minute break, and I have to do a little bit of the real job right now. So bear with me while we do that. If you're just tuning in or you've been tuning in going, what is going on here? We are live. We are in Kirkland, Washington. And this is part of the Sit Down and Listen series. And we have broadcasted some of these other series. This is hosted by Eastside Embrace, which is an activism organization located east of Seattle. I would like to say the other side of the lake. Yeah, if you just think go there.
Hi.
And we'll just get you a little framed up. Give me a second here, Erica.
Yeah.
You're tall and I'm downslope from you, so, and my screen is really backlit from the sun. Just give me one more second. I think we're good. All right.
Okay.
So basically what we're just gonna do, I'll just ask your name, you know, you can go your name and all. Just explain what Eastside Embrace is and what's going on. I'll just ask you a few questions. So let me,
Live streaming right now?
yeah.
Okay, because I'm not actually a member. Like I don't run Eastside Embrace. That's Michaela.
Okay. Oh, because Michaela handed me off to you.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
So we'll change it up then. We can
Well,
talk.
Eastside Embrace is an anti-racist organization on the East Side. It's run by Michaela Rice. I just happened to.
Here, one second. We need to restart. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Whenever you're ready.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh,
Just
I'm
say.
ready now?
Just tell me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just tell me your name and.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Erica. And you wanted to know what Eastside Embrace is all about?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So yeah, I don't actually run Eastside Embrace. That's Michaela Rice. But it's an anti-racist organization on the East Side. And I think Michaela will do a better job at talking about all the things that she does, because I actually don't know everything she does. But a part of what she does, and that I've partnered with her on, is working to educate the community on how to be anti-racist and to just amplify the voices of BIPOC.
Erica, you gave this very powerful speech and presentation about racism and racism towards the Asian community, which has been very amplified since COVID arrived right here in Kirkland, right? We are in ground zero. If you don't want to talk about it and relive trauma, you could just put up, and I will respect that, but could you tell us a little bit about that if you want to talk about it?
Yeah, that feels like a very general question. Like kind of like what I talked about in the speech, or just like what's going on for the Asian community right
just
now?
what, yeah.
I mean, you know, bottom line is right now we're living in fear, right? And yeah, just to like tell a little bit about like a personal experience is like I feel like I have to look over my shoulder everywhere I go right now. Asian Americans are being attacked, and especially elders. Of course, women, the women who were murdered in Atlanta. And I think one of the things that feels important to say right here too, and it's something that I said in the speech earlier, was just around the tension that we think exists between Asians and Black people. And the tension is actually white supremacy. It's not a mistake that there is this perceived tension anyhow, and that white supremacy can be internalized by anybody. So, people are quick to bring up that some of the Asians that have been attacked by Black people. But those Black people that attacked Asians were just subscribing to a white supremacist narrative. That we brought COVID and that we're subhuman. And I mean, you saw the speech on there, so I don't need to repeat it, right?
Right.
And the Asian people that are blaming the whole Black community for the attacks on us are subscribing to the white supremacist narrative that Black people are aggressive and subhuman. And so that's just a really important piece, and it just sort of magnifies, just put a magnifying glass on white supremacy. I don't know how else to say it, like it's not real.
What can somebody do beyond interceding if they see overt racism? What can somebody do to educate themselves, better themselves, to realize what is going on around them?
Yeah. Well, one thing you were talking about intervening, like there is a training called Hollaback, and so that helps equip people with the tools that they need to deal with like witnessing an attack, and how you can intervene even if it doesn't mean directly intervening and putting your safety in jeopardy. But as far as the education piece, I mean, there's so many amazing activists and educators, especially Black educators and activists. Like one person that comes to mind is Nikita Oliver. You know, they're amazing, and they have, so yeah, I'm gonna take sort of a detour. They have a online syllabus, a free syllabus to people on abolition. And I really encourage people to just go learn, even if abolition like sounds like this scary word to you at this time, like just go check it out and try to learn about why that's even, you know, being said in the world. You know, like there is a need to rebuild everything from the ground up, rebuild the system from the ground up, and it can't be reformed. The police, the prison industrial complex cannot be reformed. And so that's just one piece that comes to mind. But you know, following Sonia Renee Brown, shoot, I think I'm getting the wrong name now. But there's a lot of educators out there on Instagram. You know, like just go listen to what Black people have to say and believe them. Go listen to what BIPOC people have to say and believe the lived experience and believe the knowledge and wisdom that they're sharing. And then as far as action, right? Like we need to be, you know, learning is a big piece, but then we have to do something with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we have to act. We have to act. We have to support reparations, like I talked about in the speech very briefly, because we have to make the wrongs right first, right? We have to support the divesting from the police and investing in communities of color. You can contact your city officials, you can write, you can call, you can sign petitions, right? There's a lot of ways that you can get active even from home, you know? I don't know.
Yeah. Erica, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Would you mind grabbing Nikayla?
Yeah, I'll go grab it right now.
Okay, I really appreciate it. And again, wonderful speech. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It really was powerful.
Hope that was okay.
Oh, you were wonderful. You were fine. Absolutely. We're gonna have Nikayla Rice come over in a little bit. That was Erica. Erica was one of the speakers earlier. We are at Sit Down and Listen, put together by Eastside Embrace. This is the 5th installment going back to last year. We're at Juanita Beach Park in Kirkland, Washington. If you're not familiar with the geography here, we are not looking out at Puget Sound, we're looking out at Lake Washington. Lake Washington is massive. It continues far to my north of where we're at here in Kirkland, and it goes south all the way down to Renton, and it basically splits the central Puget Sound in half. That's why this side is called the East Side, or the East Side, and then Seattle is called the West Side. And Nikayla is walking over.
Hello.
Hi there. You're not going to escape.
Damn it. Do you want me to stand right here?
Yeah, just get yourself. Yeah, you're fine. Right.
Sit?
Oh, if you want to sit, you can sit. Up to you.
Okay, I'm gonna sit.
All right, you can. I know you've been standing a lot, so if you want to sit, we'll go ahead and we'll lower the camera.
I appreciate it.
And we'll get you framed up here. And we'll start recording. So Nikayla, what we'll do here is just have you start off with, you know, your name and, you know, Nikayla, could you tell me your name and the organization you represent?
Hi there, my name is Nikayla Rice. I'm the founder of Eastside Embrace.
Could you do it one more time, Nikayla? I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's fine. Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready now.
Hi there, my name is Nikayla Rice. I'm the founder of Eastside Embrace. We are a grassroots nonprofit in the Eastside, Redmond, Kirkland, and Bothell. So this is pretty much the event. Yeah. So what else?
Tell us about the series that you're doing, the Sit Down and Listen series. This is the 5th one that you've done.
Yes, it is. So this series actually came about when I was talking to Kirkland council members, and they gave us 2 minutes to speak about what our problems were and how we felt as Black people in this community. And I said, that's not enough time. So I've been holding these sit down and listen events to amplify Black and BIPOC voices in our community, so we feel safe and people know what's going around, what's going on in our community. Yeah.
I think that's all I need.
All right.
That'll help me lead in for the story tomorrow. Thank you, Nikayla. I hear you. Yeah, because I'm all vaccinated, so you can.
I can hug you.
You can hug me now. I know, because like for the last 15 months, I've been, get away from me! Don't touch me! Don't breathe on me! All right, so for those of you who are on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube, I'm gonna have to mute because of the music. Mods, admins, if you could just let people in the various channels know we're muted, because YouTube in particular gives us a hard time with the background music.
But I'm really, really excited to.
All right, for those of you.
Not just an amazing individual, but an artist, just like me, a different one, but she's so talented.
Give me 1 second here.
I'm so happy. All right, so I'm gonna have Adrian come up, and so I just want, can we get some woos, please?
All right, I'm gonna have to book it.
Thank you. All right, I'll give you this body.
Book it.
Hi everyone, my name's Adrian Watson, and I am, thank you so much. I'm 18 years old. I like to think I'm an old soul though, so you know it all catches up. But, which I don't know if that sounds cocky or not. I'm gonna go with it doesn't, and that, you know, self-love. That's what we always gotta say, right? If you ever feel too cocky, just say, it's all self-love. That's all it is. But I write poetry, I sing and I act. Today I'm here as a poet. I'm going to read you a couple of my things. I'm also going to talk a little bit about my personal experience as a person of color. I use they, she pronouns as well. I prefer people use them, you know, interchangeably, recognize all identities. But today, one of the things I want to talk about is unrealistic beauty standards for women and femme people in general. So, for me, I grew up always knowing that my mother was beautiful. Every time we went anywhere, people would compliment her on her appearance, always asked her, "You can't be that old, right? Like, how is that possible? How can you have kids that are this age?" And so I used to always like hope that I would be like her and look like her, because that's how I was conditioned to be. But the issue with that is my mother is white. My father is black, and I, as I'm sure you can tell, am biracial. And it was hard growing up, seeing a woman that like you respected and looked up to who looked nothing like you. And even when I was in preschool, I would draw myself as a little white girl with like blonde hair and blue eyes, which is like, I still look back at those photos and I laugh at them because that was full on denial, you know? Because to me, growing up with how people treated my mother, I thought that was what beauty was. And I thought that it couldn't be anything else. And I'm coming to realize now that that is not the case. Yes, my mother is beautiful, but I am also beautiful. We are all beautiful. We all have beautiful qualities and beautiful traits, and no one can take that away from us. But looking at what is represented in the media, it doesn't always come off that way. And I would also like to recognize my privilege in this moment as a biracial person. And I would like to recognize that colorism exists, not only within the Black community, but multiple other communities. We grow up seeing different people that we think represent us, but at the end of the day, I want to make this clear. When you see people of color, think, do you see all people of color, or just what the media brands as okay, as acceptable? And this is not to discredit these other people of color, but it's also to open the door to those who are also beautiful, who aren't represented. And I would just like to say I appreciate all of y'all coming out tonight. I wrote some poetry, and I'm hoping y'all enjoy it. And I hope that you all recognize that we are all beautiful in our own way. That's one thing I want you to take away from this. And my choice to be an artist came not just because I love making art. To me, that was a hobby in the beginning. But then seeing how there were no people like me represented in media, I knew I had to do more. I knew that I had to represent those who aren't currently being represented, those who are too quiet or too afraid to represent themselves. And
little AV issue.
1 second. One second, y'all.
What's the car on mic? Little pause here. There's an AV issue. That's right. Please go ahead and spam those hearts. Spam those hearts for our mods and admins. Let them know that you appreciate all the hard work that they do.
okay, we're back. I lost my train of thought because I have like the memory capacity of like a hamster. So I'm just gonna move on to my poetry, if that's all right with y'all. And this first one is dedicated to my grandmother, who helped me realize that there are more things to just womanhood than being a woman. Because, like I mentioned before, I use they, she pronouns. And the reason I came to this decision was not because I'm afraid of being a woman. I'm afraid of what womanhood is in our current society. And I never felt like I represented that, because a lot of the time when you look at what we consider being a woman, being beautiful, being everything a strong woman is meant to be, it is focused in Eurocentric standards, and that is not fair to everyone who doesn't fit that expectation. And she really helped me come to that realization, and she really supported me through my entire process. So this one's dedicated to Mima, love her so much. It's called I Remember When. I remember when I started to feel comfortable again with my grandmother I had spent my entire life. I went to rodeos and sang I Am Woman with her in the back of the car. She'd take me on bike rides and she always wanted to hold my hand. But things grew different when Mom decided to swap out roasted California air for frigid Washington nights. Mima stayed behind, content to live with her ghosts, until one day I found her, standing on our rain-soaked doorstep. She shuffled past me out of the cold and came into the dining room. We weren't finished having dinner. She pulled a faded photograph from the pocket of her leather jacket and placed it on the cold kitchen table. Even now, I forget the name of the woman in the photo. Just know that my mother never liked her. The entire conversation was focused with our eyes pointing toward our table. And the woman in the photo had a crooked smile. My mother never liked her. She had her arm around my grandmother. They met in 1997, moved in with each other in 1998, and my grandmother buried her in 1999. That's the end of my first piece. Thank you so much. It's meant to highlight the struggles that LGBT plus people face in our current society, especially BIPOC individuals who are part of the LGBT plus community. And I always think it is so important to recognize how much people go through with that intersectionality and to lift them up when they need it. Because at the end of the day, one thing I realized, especially being biracial, is I couldn't go to my mother with the issues I had. Her being a white woman, she couldn't possibly understand. I couldn't go to my father as a black man to understand what it was like to be a biracial woman or a biracial person. And that's a lot of what intersectionality is about. Trying to bridge those gaps and recognize that we're all in this together and supporting those who have different struggles than us while also not invalidating them. This next poem I'm going to read is related to me being an artist. Once again, not to sound cocky, but I like to think I'm an artist. And I wrote this, again, related to unwelcome standards of beauty within the field. It's based off of a song called Beautiful Skin by Goody Mob. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but there's a common trend in music of lifting women up, but also breaking them down. Like looking at them as objects and talking about how beautiful they are. But then when it comes down to actually recognizing them as people, it's constant disrespect. And I used to love this song because I thought it represented people like me and people who are just like women of color. I thought it was meant to represent us, but when you actually look at the words, it breaks down women continuously, back to back to back. And there's a distinct line where they talk about how women are allowed to do whatever they want and believe whatever they want, and how women are articulate. But at the end of the day, women show too much skin in modern society. And a distinct line they had there said, if you believed, young lady, you wouldn't dress that way. And it's things like this that really hold us back. Because too often we just kind of fall into that. We listen to the compliments instead of acknowledging the injustices that are put upon us. And that's not something we should have to do anymore. So I wrote this as a response to that. It says, you're my beginning, my end, and I don't plan on ruining it. I can't help but wonder when the song is going to change. What's next on the playlist that the two of us made? I hope it flows well. Hope the women described in the songs look like me and their lyricists respect them, but that's not popular, is it? Treating women with respect. It's threatening to the men behind the mic. It's heartbreaking for the women who raised them right, and I believe that you will listen one day. If you believed, young man, you wouldn't talk that way. Thank you. And before this last poem that I want to read, I just want to talk briefly about something that I learned in my Asian American Studies class. And I mentioned this briefly in another sit down and listen, but I would like to bring it up again because it's always important to recognize, and especially now, it is important to recognize this fact that the model minority myth was meant to break down Black people and Asian Americans. There's no other way to cut it. It was meant to divide us, and white people made us believe that we couldn't be united. And the whole concept of saying, oh, well, Asian people are able to succeed academically, why can't Black people do it? That was a common thread and has continued to be a common thread in our school systems, in our businesses, in our everyday life. And we need to work against that. Because at the end of the day, it is no one's fault except for the white people who continue to hold up that belief, who continue to hold up that narrative. And when we fall into that, we don't give people of color a chance to unite and work together. And we need that. I will say that unabashedly, unashamed. We need our own space to unite without having to worry about white people twisting our words around or telling us that we should hate each other. Because at the end of the day, we shouldn't be hating anyone. And too often, people of color are expected to educate, are expected to discuss horrible things that have happened to them, to work through their trauma. And it is always important to recognize that those things do happen, but you also want to recognize the beauty. People of color can be happy. People of color can have good lives, enriched lives, without centering everything on the things that hurt them. And so for those that take on that role of discussing that trauma, discussing that pain, working against that hurt, it is work. It is not something that is done because it's enjoyable. It is not something that is done because we feel like no one else is going to do it for us, but at the end of the day, no one else is going to do it for us. And that's hurtful. Even I have had friends who haven't supported me in my own journey with community work. And that's hard to watch when you have those white friends who don't have to fight for basic human rights, who don't have to fight for their own liberation. And in the same way, they watch you struggle and continue to just sit by and watch it happen. And this next poem I'm going to read, I have read it multiple times. People like it, which is why I continue to read it. But I wrote it after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And it's titled An Open Letter because, as I said the first time I read it, I wanted to have something for my family to remember me by that wasn't inflated or conflated by either the police department or just general news. I didn't want that to happen. So I wanted to hear something from my own mouth about what went down. And a lot of the time, when people have things that they release after they die, it's like planned ahead of time, it is accompanied by a will, but I'm gonna be frank, I am a college student, I own nothing. So, this is what I have to represent that. And as I said before, it is titled An Open Letter. I hope y'all enjoy it. It's the last thing I'm gonna be reading for y'all, and then I'll leave y'all alone. And we can move on to the next person and hear another wonderful speaker. But I just wanted to end on this note. It reads as follows. If I am found dead in police custody, know that I did nothing wrong, that not once was I a threat to myself or others. I tried my best to stay alive. and that those responsible for my safety were the ones who decided that I was undeserving. If I am found dead in police custody, tell my family I love them. Tell my father that he is the one who made me strong, and that my favorite memory is of him bailing me out of school in the 3rd grade just because he missed me, and that he has always been my hero and my shoulder to cry on. Tell him that I'm proud of him. Tell my mother that I miss her, and that I miss giving her bouquets of weeds that I, in my youth, once considered flowers. Tell her I love watching trashy reality TV with her, and listening to music with her in the car. No matter how well she knew the song, she always came in 2 measures early, just like a white woman. And she would say, a day is gonna come when I won't be around anymore to sing the song wrong, and you're gonna miss me. So please tell her I miss her. Tell my brother I believe in him, and whatever he chooses to do. I always knew he was the sibling with a heart of gold, and I'm sorry for terrorizing him when we were younger. And I'd give anything to go back to a time when our biggest fear was getting caught by our parents in the middle of a cookie heist. I'd give anything to hear you call me Sissy again. Tell him I'm sorry for leaving him alone, and that he will no longer have to share his things with me. And though I want him to make it through this world without me, I know he will look back at a time when we were children. How he used to give me wet willies and piggyback rides, and now that I am gone, he will carry me like a child on his back for the rest of his life. So if I am found dead in police custody, give my father your shoulder to cry on. The security he never had as a child, the security he gave me, because too often Black men are expected to remain calm in a crisis, are expected to cope with the numerous injustices thrust upon them and stand unbroken in the face of tragedy. My father will be allowed more than a single tear. Give my mother a vase to put her flowers in, so she knows that I live on through the things she loves, and she will hold fast to me the same way I clutched at her skirts as a child. She will love me, even if she cannot hold me. Give my brother his lungs back, for he spends his whole life running away from hatred and toward acceptance, but they keep on moving the finish line. I simply ask that when he has no air to breathe, and he seems ready to collapse, that those who created and continue to profit from this unjust system pick him up and carry him across that finish line. So he may be done with a race he never should have had to run in the first place. In short terms, give him a break. And while the media may brand me a criminal, I ask you to see me as a victim of America's unfulfilled promise, the promise of love. Because it will become clear to me in my last moments that America never loved me. And when my story is shown on the news, it will not be mentioned that I tried my best to love America. The news anchor will simply say, an 18-year-old Black woman has been found dead in police custody. Thank you so much for your time. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you get something out of what I said and what all the other wonderful speakers have said. And just have a wonderful day, y'all. Continue to grow and continue to work. Thank you so much.
Absolutely beautiful and powerful.
Lots of feelings today. Before anything, I just want people to know her Venmo is on that board. She is amazing. I just want one more thank you. Woo! And please support her. Please do. God. Our next speaker is going to be Joy. She is amazing too, and I'm just going to pass it on. Thank you.
I believe Joy spoke yesterday at the Not Your Model
everyone.
Minority March.
Whew. It's hot. I hope you're hydrating out there. I just want to say I'm so honored to be here and to follow some really amazing speakers. Adrienne, I know her from a previous project, and hearing her poetry, I have to kind of catch my breath. But please support our artists, especially our BIPOC artists. We need them in this resistance. So please, give her money. Okay, sorry I'm nervous. And also I'm trying to still come down from organizing a big march yesterday in Seattle. It was a Not Your Model Minority March. I may teach you a new chant at the end of this. So again, my name is Joy Randall. I use she, her, and sha pronouns. The sha is Tagalog, and that is gender neutral. In the language of Tagalog, we don't have he or she. So essentially when you're referring to someone, you use sha. And so this is me honoring my culture. I was born in the Philippines, so I'm honoring that and using that pronoun. I do too, except the government, so. Okay, I'm a first generation immigrant. I came here with my parents at the age of 2. I grew up in Michigan. And while that was tough as the only Asian in school in a predominantly white community. So since my mom is a nurse, now retired, our journey led us to Michigan since there was a need for more nurses at the time during the 70s. So we moved there where we built a small community with other Filipinx families with nurses. So I'll note I use Filipinx because that is inclusive of trans and non-binary gender roles. You may have heard of the term Latinx, and that is to be inclusive. So these families were in fact friends that went to nursing school with my mom. A huge wave of nurses came after the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965 was passed, which I'm going to interject here that since COVID-19 hit, Filipinx nurses make up just 4% of the nation's nationwide, but 1/3 of those nurses that have died from coronavirus. People are still trying to understand this disproportionate ratio, which is another topic that needs to be discussed. I'll just say right now that the most high-risk tasks are always filled by nurses of color. So a huge wave of immigrants from Asia and the Pacific Islands came after the Immigration Naturalization Act of 1965. This is just one reason we owe so much to the civil rights movement and to the Black community that took charge for fighting for equality. Because of their fight, we in the API community benefit. We have to remember that. Here we are now, 56 years later after this was passed. We are still trying to fight for justice, for equity, for acknowledgement, for inclusion and belonging for all communities of color. We still haven't gotten there. And this new movement is our opportunity to really push that boulder over the top of that mountain instead of it rolling back on us. It rolled back on us after Reconstruction and the Civil Rights Movement. This is our opportunity now. We need to shove it over the top. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to get there? One way is to face some tough truths about our history, our society, about us and how we have been ingrained with a mentality that upholds a system that does not serve all people. A system rooted in white supremacy. And I thank you for having your sign back there, End White Supremacy. This is the fight of solidarity against white supremacy, not against each other. One truth is how the Asian and Pacific Islander community has been used as a wedge. And Eric already talked about this as far as the model minority myth. Used as a wedge against the Black community. I've learned this was first coined by a white sociologist, William Peterson, in 1966, describing how Japanese families achieve success, overcoming the discrimination they experienced by working hard. Many in the Asian community, well, we wanted to be seen as American, to be accepted as much as possible. So they promoted this hardworking, our kids are obedient, they're not juvenile delinquents, we follow the rules, we are good citizens. We wanted that public image. Made sense at that time, right? It did. After World War II. The start of the 20th century, Asians in America were portrayed as threatening, exotic, and degenerate. The Chinese Exclusion Act from 1882 was the first federal law to place restrictions based on race in the US. This was not repealed until 1943. And that was only for the interest of boosting morale from China as a World War II ally. So the Asian community rode this model minority boost to their image in hopes that it would change the anti-Asian sentiment that's been present pretty much since the first API immigrants came to this country. Has this helped us become accepted more? Many will argue that we aren't discriminated against anymore. We are now accepted. We have nothing to complain about. Someone just told me that last week. Asked me, why am I so angry? I should be thankful that I've made it. Don't get me wrong, I acknowledge the privilege that I have. I acknowledge what I have benefited from living in this country. My parents came for a better life because their country was, let's just say, they needed to leave. And that's another discussion of US imperialism. But again, yes, I acknowledge I am very fortunate, very fortunate. This has come at a cost though. And I and many have basically accepted that cost. To be close as possible to whiteness. To be seen as close as possible to being white. So I mentioned how tough it was to grow up in Michigan. I and my family had to assimilate in order to survive, in order to be accepted, to be that model minority, not make any trouble. You don't want to wave or rock the boat. I wanted to be white. When Erica mentioned that earlier, the tears were starting to form in my eyes because this is something that we often identify with. So yes, I wanted to be white. A friend told me my yearbook picture in the high school yearbook, my face looked dirty. I wanted the European features that were considered beautiful, so kids would stop telling me I was ugly. So what's the one multi-billion-dollar industry in Asia? Does anyone have a guess? It is skin whitening products. Many in my family, particularly the women, have used these products. And I've been told by friends, oh, I don't see you as Filipino, but I see you more as American. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment at the time, really. And now I know it definitely was not a compliment. So, we are erased. We are dismissed. Our experiences of discrimination, microaggressions, racism are minimized, not seen as a big deal, because we've allowed our community, which is seen as a monolithic group, despite the vast countries that are there in Asia, right? We're all kind of lumped together. People can't even tell us apart. So people don't see how the Asian community has the greatest wealth disparity out of any community. People don't see how Laotian, Cambodian, Hmong, Burmese, Bhutanese communities experience poverty at greater levels than low-income whites. We've all been and still are used as a wedge to uphold systemic racism. We ourselves maintain that complicity. If we do not start speaking up, we have to build solidarity with Black and Indigenous communities who suffer the greatest from poverty, homelessness, police brutality, incarceration, and racism. This proximity to whiteness and believing we are safe is a fallacy. We have to break from that. We've been historically scapegoated in this country. Every time there is a crisis or an issue, we have been scapegoated. There's a long history of Asian hate, murders, when white people have been threatened, whether it's for their jobs or safety, from the belief that API immigrants are taking their jobs, all the way to 9/11, when the Muslim and Sikh community were targeted. And must point out the current crisis right now in the Sikh community is experiencing after that mass shooting at the FedEx plant. 90% of those workers there are Sikh. So if someone says that's not racially motivated, I do not believe that. That's what they said about what happened in Atlanta when all those women were shot, most of them Asian women, that the shooter was just having a bad day, just had a sex addiction. So we're used when it serves to uphold the status quo, the current system that is rooted in white supremacy. We are pitted against the Black community when we call for more police as the answer to the increase of anti-Asian assaults across the country. The police do not prevent crime. I've been told when people call the police in the International District in Seattle for anything, it's hours until they get there. And by that time, what can they really do? So the police, they are not going to save us. The mass media also highlights the Black assailants when it's mostly white assailants that make up most of the violence against the different Asian people across the country. So we have to remember that, how this mass media poses this, and this stokes anti-Blackness. That's another truth we have to face, the embedded anti-Blackness that is in the API community. We have been drinking the Kool-Aid that white supremacy serves to ensure the divide and conquer. We believe there's only so much of this American dream to go around. There's only so many pieces of this pie. We're only given a certain amount of that pie. And we, as communities of color, we have to fight each other for the scraps. We need to stand in solidarity and support each other. I'm especially calling on my API community to be in solidarity with the Black and Indigenous communities. So I want to show this poster. So this is a poster of Yuri Kochiyama and Malcolm X. Okay, so I want to just highlight this because solidarity is in our history. Okay, so many know Malcolm X. I hope you do. If not, I think you better start reading. But Yuri Kochiyama, not a lot of people know her. You may have seen her in the photo when Malcolm X was assassinated. She was the person that was holding his head as he died on the floor. She was the daughter of Japanese immigrants. Her family was incarcerated in internment camps during World War II, eventually becoming a political activist through her life, where her New York City home became a weekly meeting place for freedom riders and other activists, and eventually welcoming a young Tupac Shakur in the mix. But she fought for Black liberation. I don't know if you could see this other poster. This is a poster of Grace Lee Boggs and James Boggs. Grace Lee Boggs was a daughter of Chinese immigrants. Boggs was a lifelong activist in Detroit, Michigan for civil rights and for the Black Power movement in partnership with her fellow activist husband, James Boggs. So they hold a special place in my heart just because I grew up in Michigan. And James Boggs worked at Chrysler. He was an auto worker. And my father was an auto worker. And my mother, as a nurse, occupational nursing for Chrysler as well. So they hold a very special place in my heart. So again, solidarity is our history. We have to learn more of our history, particularly the history that is not readily taught or known, that challenges what we've been socialized to believe in this country. We're not going to make the structural and systemic changes we need to attain democracy if we don't learn that history. Yes, Native American history, Black history, Asian history, that is just American history. Why do we only get 1 month? And I think that's something that parents, and I appreciate City Council being here. I don't know if there's any school board members. The curriculum, especially here on the East Side, really needs to change. So the Black community has always been the ones who have pushed this country to fulfill the claim of the democracy it really wants to be. It pushes for it. We have to remember that. We won't reach the changes we need unless we build and strengthen all our communities, build our connections to each other, focus on community care, on mutual aid. We can't do this in isolation from each other. So I ask you to continue learning, reading, sharing with everyone you know. Attend events like this, webinars, protests, marches, sign petitions, call, write your city officials. This is the time. We may not see the change it takes in our lifetime, but we see a lot of small children here. We don't want them to grow up and be up here again saying the same thing, do we? So for future generations, we need to act now. So I really appreciate all of you being out here. It is hot. The march yesterday was really hot. I was afraid people were gonna drop like flies, but summer is here. And I hope all of you learn, reach out, and thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you.
All right. Thank you, Joy. Can we just do one more round of applause? Thank you. We've had some amazing speakers. We're not just done. I know we're running over time. As you can see the board now, it says 4-ish. I'll give it about 30 more minutes, but we do have one more speaker, and then I'm going to speak at the end, and then we have a performance. So the next speaker is going to be Jocelyn.
Malcontents, I have a hard stop actually at 4 o'clock. We're going to extend for this speaker, and then we'll have to end the stream. But we really thank you for joining us.
Hello. I'm really nervous, so bear with me.
Don't be nervous.
And I know some of you, I see the questions in the streams, but we generally as a rule don't talk over speakers out of respect.
I use she, her pronouns. I first want to thank the people who put this event together and spent energy and time on education and sharing their stories. I know the pandemic has made finances hard on a lot of families, but if you have the means, I urge you to send money to the Venmos shared at this event today, which are on the boards over there. Being educated is a gift, and the generous people here today should be paid for their hard work and the energy they put into this event. As a white person, it is not my job to take up space, but I was asked to speak today to the white people in the audience and how we can be more intentional about our anti-racist work. When we hear that white people take up too much space, you might think that means you need to be quieter. You might think that white people can get rid of racism by shrinking ourselves. And there are times where that is the answer. White people, let your queer, femme, BIPOC coworkers speak more than you at that work meeting. But acknowledge that becoming quieter doesn't actually diminish the power we as white people have. That power already exists, which is why action is not optional. I want to remind everyone that it is a privilege to be able to turn off the TV and social media and not think about racism. It is a privilege that we are educating ourselves about racism and not experiencing it. I recently read something that said, just because you're reading about anti-racism doesn't mean you are anti-racist. The comparison was, would you say I read about mountain climbing, therefore I am a mountain climber? Reading and educating yourself is great, and we should absolutely be doing that. But we also need to be taking action. I saw a post the other day on social media that said, when you're white, you're taught that everything belongs to you. And it's so true. We dominate every single space, and Black people learn how to navigate in white spaces because that's what we live in. I was listening to a poet named Inez Smith read his poem called What Was Said at the Bus Stop. One of the lines from the poem was, I'm sorry the world is so good at making us feel like we have to fight for space to fight for our lives. Just want you to sit with that for a sec. The poem was called What Was Said at the Bus Stop. I actually heard it in a podcast called Code Switch. Yep. So when I say we need to be taking action, this means examining all spaces we white people take up and how we can change that. Pay attention to how your work treats people of color. Is your work currently talking about Black Lives Matter and violence against the AAPI community? Speak up when someone says something you know is racist. I feel like that should just be, we should just know that by now. And please stop telling people of color about the racist thing you heard someone say. It's traumatic enough when they have to live through that themselves. They don't need to hear the stories and then hear how you did nothing about it. And even if you did something, don't go to people of color for validation on your anti-racist actions. They're not here to make us feel better. Look at how much space you're taking up as a white person. Go to protests, show up for the Black community and the AAPI community, all communities of color, show up. Use your white privilege to protect Black people. If you see a police officer pulling over a Black person, pull over and make sure they're safe. Stop relying on the BIPOC community to educate you. Pay Black people who are giving out free education. Like I said, the Venmos are right there. Pay attention to the education your kids are receiving, which was just touched on by Joy. They are not teaching kids Black history, Indigenous history, Asian history, really any history that doesn't center white people. This might sound repetitive, but I can imagine that Black people feel like a broken record. Have the uncomfortable conversations with your friends and family, and not just one time. Keep having them. This is an ongoing thing. It's ongoing work. It's never ending. We need to acknowledge white defensiveness and how destructive it is to BIPOC communities. Have those conversations so Black people don't have to. I read somewhere that the Black community doesn't even get the chance to grieve because they are too busy fighting for their existence. Again, just like sit with that for a second. It is important to acknowledge as white people that this experience will never be our experience, and recognizing the privilege of that reality. As we continue to learn and unlearn, I hope you can think about every time you feel yourself getting defensive with anyone from the BIPOC community, you can stop and be aware of how harmful that is. Because what you're really defending isn't yourself, it's white supremacist delusion. We're in the wrong, just be okay with that and sit in it. Be okay with being uncomfortable and know that deep discomfort might actually mean you're doing something right. Be okay with being told we have to do better, because it's absolutely true. Ending white supremacy is a white person problem to fix. I wanted to be really careful with my time and space here, so I'm ending it, but I just want to say thank you so much for holding this for us, and yeah, I really appreciate it. And also, I'm uncomfortable, and I'm just gonna be uncomfortable, so be uncomfortable.
I know we're going over time, but thank you so much, Jocelyn. If you can just do one more. Thank you. Every time I host one of these events, I always say I'm not going to speak, because I really do think that the speakers here who have got the courage to come up need this time. But like always, I'm going to say something. My name is Nikila Rice. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the founder of Eastside Embrace, and I'm the one, yeah, hi. These events, actually, the reason why I even wanted to do sit down and listen events is because I went to a council meeting and we only had 2 minutes to talk about what the issue was as an experience living here as a Black woman or a person with BIPOC. And I didn't think it was enough time. 2 minutes isn't enough time to do anything, ever. And I'm really grateful that we have this opportunity for people to sit down, listen, and hear your community members of color, because there are not many of us. Since I moved out here a year and a half ago, I've seen the divide. And what I mean by that is that there are more Black Lives Matter posters at people's yards than there are Black people that live here. And that itself actually makes me really uncomfortable. And when I started speaking into my activism, I voiced my opinion. I voiced that I was uncomfortable. I was being harassed. I have dealt with racism actually at the Fred Meyer in Kirkland more than once, in my neighborhood in Kirkland, at my apartment complex, and almost every day, because someone always has to feel like they need to grab their purse when I pass by. And when I started voicing my problems, the first thing wasn't support. It was a white woman telling me I need to be grateful that I'm even living here. And I think that sets the precedence of how I feel living in the Eastside community. It's a bubble where we've had schools in the district here have blackout Fridays where kids come in blackface and no one knows except the black students. Or where strangers touch your hair. And one second, yeah. Where strangers touch your hair. And having to listen to black students tell me this and don't understand what the problem is because they aren't taught. Or the microaggressions that we deal with every day just because of the color of our skin. Or when we're told we're too sassy or loud in front of individuals, like it's okay to say that. Thank you. Thank you. And at the end of the day, it's our fault. It's our fault for being too sensitive. And none of these things that happen to us aren't perceived as racist because the majority of people living here don't experience them. So this is why I founded this organization, because we need these safe spaces to talk and for people to listen, like people said, like Jocelyn said, so I don't have to hear your stories of you combating racism or having these racist experience and coming to me and I'm like, what did you do about it? Not, I'm sorry, this is what you should have done. That should not be my job. I want to continue living on the East Side. I do have a great community of people here who support me and support the BIPOC community, but more work still needs to be done. It does not stop with me. It does not stop with just putting a yard sign in your front yard saying Black Lives Matter. It goes way past that. It goes from our policing to our schooling to everything else. And I know it's uncomfortable, but I don't want to keep repeating these things, but I don't want my kids to come here and say the same thing I'm saying, just like my father has said and just like my grandma and my great-grandma. They are been all activists, and I'm tired of repeating that cycle. I also just want to say that you can go to the Eastside Embrace website. It's eastsideembrace.com, and you can actually do a workshop. You will pay for the workshop, but if you want to learn how to break racist things in what you're doing because we don't want optical allyship, you can do that. That is one way you can do work. But you can go to protests, you can sign, you can be out here, but continue to do that work because it does not ever end, sadly. But we'll get there, not with me. But I just want to say thank you so much for everyone who is here. I do appreciate it. I want to say thank you so much to my team. Thank you so much to the community. And we are not done. We do have one more performance. Yeah, and so I'm going to let that pass, but thank you so much.
All right, let's hear a yoo-hoo or a woohoo. Yoo-hoo. Too many kids. Tell them I'm loud. Okay.
All right, give me 1 second here, everybody.
All right. So, again, do the work. Keep doing it. Keep fighting. Because people of color have to do it every second of their day.
All right,
Thanks
so
for
I'm
showing
doing
up. It means so much
turning
to
the
us.
cameras.
I'm going to introduce
You see me here, I'm talking TikTok. Sitting here talking to everybody else.
This beautiful event
I have to end the stream. I'm about 15 minutes past
for
a hard
over
stop.
30 years,
But I really thank everybody for
Anzanga has brought
participating.
the electrifying,
Share, like,
energizing
follow,
music of
amplify
African
Black
marimba
Indigenous,
weddings,
persons of color,
schools,
and the
festivals,
LGBTQIA
cultural
voices
events,
community.
and more.
They need that amplification.
Unzaga, which
Don't
means
be
to
performative,
our
be
friends,
a real
draws
ally.
its
And with
name
that,
and music
hey
from the rich
TikTok,
culture
thank you so
heritage
much.
of
Malka 10
Africa.
out.
We are honored to have them
And
here
everybody
today
else on
to
Twitch,
share this
Twitter,
joyful
YouTube, and
vibrant
Facebook.
music with
Malka
us.
10 out.
So stick around. And also, if you need water or snacks, we've got them here. I don't know.